And we're live. I had a little thing pop up on the screen. It says, you have an excellent connection. How fortuitous. Andy Austin here with another live stream, although I don't think I have any viewers at this time. So for those watching the recording, I thank you for being both a member of my channel and also for watching the content, because that's what I do it for. Now, in this one, I want to give the no-nonsense guide to meditation. And the problem about meditation is getting past all the narcissism that inhabits the meditation scene. I've been around the sort of the fringes of the meditation scene, if there is such a thing, through my interest in magic, Kabbalah, all the fraternal type stuff. I get involved with masonry, that kind of stuff. And meditation is quite a recurring theme throughout those groups. What my observation is that it certainly attracts a certain type of person. Meditation attracts navel gazers, as my wife would call them. People who have a particular self-interest. Now, one of the problems about having a self-interest is that, yeah, I can develop myself and hopefully bring balance to the self that I have an interest in. But an awful lot of people don't. They actually create an imbalance, and they basically develop more of the bits of themselves they like and ignore the rest. And it does both attract a certain level of narcissism, but I think it also fosters a level of narcissism. And so when I meet people, they say, oh, yes, I meditate every morning. My heart usually sinks, because my default response is, oh my God, we've got a narcissist. We have a narcissist in the room. Because so frequently that seems to go with the scene. Now, what I do know is this is a cultural thing. Because over in India, I've been around all sorts of like ashram type places and guru type individuals. More the holy men sadhus than the great gurus with big audiences. And my observation of the Indians is they don't have this at all. For them, to meditate is just a routine part of life. It's an everyday thing. There's nothing special about it. It's just what people do. And it doesn't seem to produce the narcissistic values that I see happening for the Westerners who tend to be drawn into this thing. So the first issue I have is to try and get past the public face, the public image of what meditation is, but also the type of people who meditate. Because I don't think I've often ever said to people, yes, my name is Andy and I meditate. And I do, and I meditate every day. But I think no one would necessarily know that I did that, because it's not something I make a display of. I don't sit in a corner of a room on a funny cushion with little symbols on my fingertips, burning incense and omming. Is a very sort of solo process that I do on the inside of my head. So no one else would necessarily know that I do this. And I'm going to go through some of the ways that I do this and how I utilize opportunity of time to do so. But the other thing is the meditation has been exploited as a commercial commodity for a very long time. And that's true in India as well. You have a lot of people who over there have exploited it, and they have big followings and make a lot of money through donations. They don't charge people necessarily for money, but they do donations. One of the attractions that I have witnessed firsthand repeatedly is the sexual interest. So a lot of people are basically joining meditation groups to try and get laid. When I meet someone who's a meditation teacher, my default response internally is, yep, we have a sex pest in the room. That is just because it seems to attract to the scene. So the difficulty is separating the, oh, I'm so spiritual and I'm really interested in vulnerable people who are navel gazers that I can coach into a better way of being, into something that's far more practical and pragmatic. And that's what I'm going to try and do today, or on this live stream. Now, I started out with all of this meditation stuff for myself as a student nurse. I was 18 years old, and I had done a 1 day or half a day visitation to one of the psychiatric units as part of my training. I think it was part of an assignment, because I was only there for really just a few hours. One of the nurses there was somebody who taught relaxation exercises, and that was her thing. I mean, she was a psychiatric nurse, but she was really big on relaxation, and she was telling us about some of these practices, and she would give people tapes. So I put my hand up and said, can I have one of these tapes? And she actually went and got a copy for me, and I took that tape back to my room later on that day. And I laid on my bed and I put the headphones on and I played the tape. Now, this was progressive relaxation. Effectively, there was just a voice on the tape with some very nice wave sound effects telling me to relax the muscles in my body. Tense the muscles in your fists, make a fist, make it tight, and relax. And then basically every muscle group of the body to tense and hold and relax. I'd never done anything like that before. As an 18-year-old, I was a perfectly ordinary young male who I was interested in girls and beer. I had never really got into that kind of activity before. And this completely blew my mind. The fact that I could go inside and qualitatively change something about myself. And I was a bit of a neurotic mess who didn't really like himself. But the fact that I could go in the inside and both change my state and also change how I was thinking was quite a dramatic revelation to me. And I listened to that tape virtually every single day. And so I realized I don't need to pace it according to the tape anymore. I could do this solo. And so tense and relax exercises were something I practiced regularly for I'd say about 20 minutes, sometimes longer a day. I'd fall asleep. So every single day. And this started to really open me up to all sorts of psychological experiences that I wouldn't otherwise have had. Because the relationship between muscular tension and how we think is very closely aligned. How we breathe and how we think and muscular tension are all aligned with each other. The next thing I got introduced to was from another student nurse. And she introduced me to another thing she had learned from meditation. I think she'd probably got the same tape as well. And she had come across this particular meditational teacher. I think he was some Asian fella. Don't know his name at all. And there were pamphlets that had been given to his group. And the pamphlet that I was given was about directed attention. And this was simply lie in a supine position, so flat on your back, legs slightly apart, palms up. And your body is straight, no pillow, so completely flat on a soft surface, not on a hard floor. Breathe normally and move your awareness to your left big toe. Hold the awareness on the big toe, feel your big toe with your mind, and now move it to the right shoulder. And all you're then doing is moving your attention to different parts of the body in a systematic way to become aware of those things of the body that you're not otherwise aware of. Now, with a lot of meditational practice, we're trying to not become aware of certain things of the body. And that's a lot of those things through posture and stuff, but we'll get to that. This is actually going the other way, and it has an interesting effect of overwhelming conscious awareness. And the alternative states of mind that I would go into, the strength of the visualizations was quite remarkable. And what I found was that just by doing the relaxation exercises in conjunction with moving awareness around different parts of the body systematically so the whole body is covered, I could achieve eidetic imagery. Now, eidetic imagery is that phenomena where your eyes are closed, you're conscious but in an altered state. And what starts to happen is images form in the mind. Now, this is not a daydream type image where you're engaged with the image. The eidetic imagery is largely you are separate from the image. You're not part of what's happening. And we know from the neuroscience it forms in the blind spot. Not the fovea, the other one, whatever, scotoma. It forms in that part where the optic nerve arrives in the eyeball. I'm forgetting my anatomy here. And the image is so real, it is so unbelievably real, it's like I'm looking at it with my eyes open. And what I found was I had no control over what those images were. They were entirely random, and things I think, why that particular thing? And so the eidetic images would start to form when I was doing the overwhelm of attention by moving my attention around different parts of the body in a deep relaxation state. Then what I began to learn was that I could accelerate the speed by which I could achieve the eidetic imagery. Now, at this point, I had no value for this. I had no, what's the point? What is the purpose of any of this stuff? I didn't have a reason or any benefit that I could identify other than this was really interesting to me because it was more of me that I was exploring and experiencing. So I had a high level of self-interest. At night, lying in bed, I could again go into deep relaxation, and by focusing with my eyeballs, see, when our eyes close, we tend to start to focus more with our mind and mental imagery, and we daydream and have conversations and all sorts of adventures and fantasies and all sorts of other stuff. But with my eyes closed, what I would do is I would continue to be looking, try and look through my eyelids, look at the patterns of light and the redness and the blackness and all the swirling images that happen with visual sight, not with mental sight, and hold that attention for as long as possible. It's very hard to do. It gets harder, actually. The more you practice doing this, it gets progressively harder until it starts to get easier. And that's true for a lot of meditational practice. Now, by holding that focus on my eyeballs and look, concentrate with my eyes, I could force the eidetic imagery to start to appear really quickly. And I started to recognize that there was a specific altered state I would need to go into in order to create the eidetic images. Now, some of them would be fleeting. They would appear just for a moment and vanish. And some of them would be quite stable until I started to mentally inquire into what is happening. And that changes the state, and then the image is lost. And what I found was when that happened, it's quite hard to get back to that particular state. And in which case, I would then roll over and go to sleep. And I found this a very quick way of falling asleep. And it's something that I've always done ever since. I fall asleep really quickly. Staying asleep can be a bit of an issue, but falling asleep is a very easy thing for me to do. The next thing was I think the next inevitable progression, and this was the introduction to mantra. Now, I'd resisted mantra because my experience and exposure to mantra was largely through the transcendental meditation scene, where the mantra costs a fortune. You have to pay a fortune to be told a simple little sentence, which is given to you by your guru, which you must never repeat out loud because you ruin the magical qualities of the mantra. And then you essentially just recite the mantra over and 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 over. Because of the negative stuff I was aware of from reading around cults and things, I had kind of resisted mantras, the whole thing. Then I started to think, okay, let's give this a go. And I tried all of the traditional Om Mani Padme Hum. I tried the Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, all of those. Didn't really like any of those. They didn't really settle for me at all. And I got very much into just simply counting. And I would count from 1 to 8. Over and over and over. And I would time it with my breathing. Breathing in for a count of 8 and out for a count of 8. In for a count of 8 and out for a count of 8. And just keep going. Now because my lung capacity is quite a large lung capacity, I would then count in for 2 lots of 8 and out for 2 lots of 8. I could then count in for 4 lots of 8 and out for 4. And the more I could slow down the breathing, the greater the level of relaxation I could begin to achieve. And again, it would free up my mind to be able to go off into all sorts of flights of fancy and explorations and imaginations and eidetic images and all sorts of other stuff, all the while keeping the mantra. And still at this point, there's no massive benefit to me in terms of what this is doing. What I also then started to learn, and the book I'm going to recommend to you, is Aleister Crowley. Now, no matter what you think of Crowley and his work and all his stuff on magic, putting all that to one side, his book, 8 Lectures on Yoga, is also published under the title Yoga for Yahoos. But Aleister Crowley, 8 Lectures on Yoga. Get a copy of that book. I think it is one of the best books for meditation I've ever come across. It is the most concise work I thought he's ever written, and I'm a bit of a fan. What I then started to do was as I would walk across town over to the university or walk across the hospital buildings, I would start to walk in rhythm of the counting. So my steps would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And my breathing would also be synchronized to that rhythm too. And I would even start to almost like march. And so now I'm putting my whole body into a similar rhythm. So breathing and walking and counting and so on. Keep everything in pace. When I would be sat on a bus or sitting on a train or waiting somewhere, I would also then begin to use that opportunity to do the same thing, to regulate my breathing against the mantra, which was just simply counting 1 to 8. Sometimes I'd also use 1 to 4, just for whatever. It just felt easier sometimes to do that. Now that became a habitual thing, and I started that probably when I was about 18, 19, and I've been using that process ever since. Now, why would anyone want to do any of this kind of stuff? And this did trouble me for a long time, because the main thing around all forms of meditation is it's always spiritual. It's about spirituality. When people take some techniques and processes nicked from Buddhism, turn it into something like mindfulness or whatever else, and then it becomes a therapeutic intervention technique. And then, oh yeah, but I'm a very spiritual person because I got posters of dolphins and I collect crystals. To me, that's not spirituality. That's just a hobby. That's just something that feels nice. Nothing wrong with it necessarily, but I don't know if that's spirituality or not. When people step outside, I think, of organized frameworks of devotional practice and philosophical teachings and ways to refine a person's character, when all they're doing is collecting the fashion statements of that particular thing, I don't think that's necessarily spiritual. Does it improve people's health was an issue that I started to wrestle with very early on, because what I became aware of is the people I was learning from, the meditators, all of them were unhealthy. And the mystic's malady is a well-known phenomena that accompanies meditators and people who involve themselves in mysticism and magic and occultism. The mystic's malady is a well-recognized phenomena. Most of the enlightened people I know in real life are as unhealthy as I am, and I'm not exactly the healthiest person on the planet. That's why I do these, just in case anyone's wondering, why are you doing this at 9 o'clock in the morning, Austin? Well, because most of the afternoons I'm going back to bed. I have to. I've got a number of health concerns that basically are limiting my ability to function through the day. And I've got to say, it doesn't seem to be getting much better over time. So I don't think meditation and all that kind of mystical stuff necessarily improves one's health. Is it a causal effect of becoming unwell? I think there's some research that should be done there. Because the only thing we ever see in the literature, the New Age stuff, is how people can heal all their diseases. They can cure themselves by the power of the mind and meditation. And those who are familiar with my rants on YouTube and my blog, I don't believe that for a second. I really don't. I don't think any of these people have cured themselves of anything. I think medicine cures people of things. And what do you call alternative medicine that works? It's called medicine. So does it make people happy? That was the other one. Does it make people calm and happy? Nope, it certainly doesn't. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily the calmest person that I've come across. A bit better now as I've got older. Am I happy? Yeah, I think I am, but I don't think any of that's come through meditational practice. This is what I think, and I actually wrote this down earlier as I was wrestling with someone. It gives people the ability to regulate the internal environment of their mind. It gives people the ability to begin to regulate the internal environment of their mind. And this makes a lot of sense to me. And I don't think any of this meditational stuff can be used as a remedy, a therapeutic technique or process to cure any particular condition. I don't think any condition is necessarily going to be improved in a direct causal relationship through a meditational process. But here's what I learned through meditation. I try and regulate and control my mind to do the thing I've decided, whether it's mantra, whether it's the visualization, or any of the other things I'll get to in a bit. All of my other imaginations and thoughts and experiences, and basically try and regulate and control your mind to a fixed point of concentration and just watch the chaos that you can observe. It's amazing. It's just the absolute chaos that can happen mentally. They call it taming the wild horses of the mind. So I think this is a valid thing. The more we learn the different forms of meditation and practice them, the greater we start to regulate the internal forces. How many people are tormented in their day-to-day experience by their own thoughts? Anxious people have panic attacks. They experience the anxiety and the panic happening to them. I'm having a panic attack. People aren't aware that is a thought process they are actually engaging in, because those thoughts that are happening are so fast and outside of conscious awareness, they're not aware of them happening. They're only aware of the consequences of those thought processes that are occurring. So I think what can start to happen is that as people gain greater insight into themselves and the ability to regulate their thinking, they can begin to regulate certain traits that they may have, especially around the results of chaotic forces. I'm thinking in terms of things like schizophrenia, or people that have got internal dialogue that is really messing them up, or hallucinations, or anxiety thoughts, or racing thoughts, or an overactive mind, the inability to sleep, all of those things. They come about from dysregulation of the internal environment of the mind. And so what we can start to do is learn how to do that. Now with the mantras, here is some other stuff you can do. So I've just, my moustache soaks up the tea. So I end up with a wet face. Here are some of the things you can do. So I simply use a counting, just simply counting mantra. But I've also experimented with other aspects as well. So the counting is very much in the auditory digital system. What would happen if instead of counting 1 to 8, I have 8 musical notes? Now, I don't know much about music or music theory. And so generating musical notes to a specific thing is quite difficult for me. So I just went with Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse runs up the clock. That was the one I adopted. Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse runs up the clock. Now, imagine that's being played on a piano. So cast your mind back to when you're really little and you had the teacher at school who would play the piano in assembly. And you can hear the notes that would accompany Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse run up the clock. Now, once you've got those notes, drop the words. Because now, instead of using digital auditory of the left hemisphere, we're now going to use the analogues and the notes of the right hemisphere. And now you can run the mantra of just the notes without the content attached to it. It's a lot harder to do because this is not normally where we move our conscious awareness. It's not how we would normally deliberately engage in this act of thinking. But run a sequence of musical notes. Take any line from a song, any musical sequence, just one whatever it would be called, a line of musical sequence, and one you know well, and just run that as a mantra as well, and try that and see what happens. It starts to produce different effects, and that makes sense to me because it's using a different half of the brain. Now, on that note, there is another book I'm going to recommend called In the Right Mind by a neurologist called Robert Ornstein, and I think he died recently. Now, Robert Ornstein wrote one of my all-time favourite books, In the Right Mind. Now, he was a neurologist who was also very interested in mysticism and meditation. And so he basically investigated mysticism and meditation from a neuroscience point of view without using it to explain or debunk any of the experiences, the spiritual experiences that people can have. It's fantastic. Get a copy of that book. You'll find it, get it cheap on eBay, I'm sure. In the Right Mind by Robert Ornstein. And for those who are now looking it up, 8 lectures on yoga by Aleister Crowley, and that's C-R-O, Crow, L-E-Y, Aleister Crowley, and 2 excellent books on the subject. So we can do mantra using the digital, as where we're actually using words, or we can use the analog, or of course you can do both at the same time. Now that starts to get interesting. Now once I got that to a second nature, so what starts to happen is rather than, even though I do it silently in my imagination, I would still feel as though I'm speaking. I'd feel it in my trachea and I'd feel my tongue moving. After a while, I'm able to move the mantra to a different part of the mind, and the tongue and trachea actually now feel completely relaxed because the mantra is now somewhere else happening. It's not as though I'm virtually saying it. And that was an interesting observation, because now I could work out where is the location of the mantra that's happening and move it around. So I can start playing with these different things. Now that's kind of interesting. And round about that time, I was then really getting into more of the NLP stuff, or related to that. And some modalities then start to appear on the scene for me. I think, oh, that's kind of cool what we can do around those different things there as well. Then I would do the visualization. So not just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I would see the numbers. So in my imagination now, because I've got eidetic imagery, can I force the eidetic imagery now to match a visualization of the numbers that I'm counting? And to my amazement, yes, I could. And it's almost like I've got one of those clocks where the numbers flop over. You know, those things. You see them in train stations and stuff for announcements where things click, 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 and they change over. That was the form the visualizations took. That wasn't my plan, but that's how it took. So now what I can do is I can have the intonation of the tonality and the digital of the counting, and now I can see it as well. So the visualization. And I got pretty good at that, and I could keep that going for quite a long period of time. Then I thought, okay, can we make this a little bit more complicated? What else can I do now to basically learn to regulate mind? What would happen is, whilst I've got the mantra, which is almost running automatically, the visualization, which does still require a conscious effort on my part, and I've got the tones as well going with it, and the tonality. Now what can I do? What would happen if, whilst I'm counting, independently of that rhythm, I'm visualizing the alphabet? So I've got my clicky thing of the numbers whilst I'm counting that's changing, and I'm also, and it's kind of almost like it was behind it, I'm visualizing the alphabet A, B, C, and that changes each time, but out of rhythm. So it's not going at the same rhythm. That was quite difficult to do, because every time I go 1, 2, it would be A, B at the same sequence. Now move it out of sequence. So I've got two independent things happening simultaneously. I could do it, and that was like, okay, that's interesting. Couldn't do it, keep it up for too long. It would all start to go fall apart. But I got better at it as time went on. Now, what that started to do for me, I noticed my ability to concentrate improved tremendously. Not concentrating on other things, not concentrating on things on the outside. I was able to concentrate on internal concepts. And I think this has helped me tremendously in working out the things that I've developed in terms of therapy and change work. Because I can take a particular concept that might be quite difficult, that people may take at face value. Some people learn a concept merely by the ability to repeat the words of what they were taught of it. They don't then apply that to multiple areas and really get inside it and understand it from different things. I recognize that that's something I was able to do a lot easier and a lot quicker. I can take pictures in my mind of certain things and move them around and transpose them into other contexts in order to investigate those concepts more fully. And I think that increased my ability to learn and comprehend things that I was learning. So also I've got a better internal regulation. Something I learned from my travels in India, and my observation is still true every time I go to India. I'm quite often the only non-Indian on the plane, because I go for often Air India and stuff like that, and most people on the plane are from India. I'm the guy who fidgets within minutes of sitting still. I'm not very good at sitting still at all. And I can never sleep on planes. It's a nightmare. I spend now, these days, because I've got older and more creaky, I spend most of my flights standing up. These guys, they get on the plane, I would watch them sit down, they would just sort out their stuff, blanket over their head, and they don't move for 12 hours. How do they do? I would see them on buses, especially in the old days, the rickety metal seat buses, which are shaking, and they're the real bone shakers. Everyone's asleep, and no one seems to be. I was amazed, and I know why, because people are accustomed to sitting still on a stone or hard surface floor. They're used to meditating and overcoming physical discomforts. And I think there's a lot to that, because a lot of freeing of the mind to go off into these weird and wonderful experiences, if we are so focused on our physical comfort, and try this, sit cross-legged and sit still on a carpeted floor, and try and hold a fixed position, whatever the position is, it doesn't matter. You could do cross-legged, you could do it rolled up in a ball, or even just sit in a chair, and hold the position and don't move, not a muscle. See how long you can handle that for before a little tiny part of the body starts to scream at you how uncomfortable it is, and starts to tell you maybe if you just moved a little bit it would be more comfortable. Just the tiniest movement, it's not much. And you make that adjustment, and then, oh no, there comes another one. And the overwhelm, the constant physiological feedback to try and keep you moving is remarkable. Buddhists and Hindus meditators learn very, very early in life to overcome that particular thing. And so they're able to find comfort very, very easily. And I am convinced, now I've got older, I think so many people would be happier as an adult if they were trained as children to be able to tolerate and overcome petty inconveniences in the physical comfort. What we do in our homes, we build as maximum comfort. We make our beds as comfortable as we can. We make our clothes as comfortable as we can. We try and avoid all sources of pain and discomfort, both psychologically, emotionally, and also physiologically, most of all. And we have this great fear of having discomfort and pain and degrees of physical suffering. I suspect a lot of people as adults would be a lot happier if they had been trained as children to not suffer so badly over petty deprivations. That's just my thinking now as an adult. Now I'm not the child who's being trained to sit uncomfortably on a stone wooden floor and get hit with a stick, because that's what happens, you know. Right, what else have we got on I've got quite a list of stuff here. Right, other meditational practices. Now, this came from my instruction in the magical lodges that I was part of. These are exercises. I didn't do these habitually. These weren't daily practices for me, but they were exercises that I would engage in on a regular basis, predominantly in order to pass a grade within the lodge or within the order, because you're assessed on certain things in some groups. And so these are classic magic training exercises. And what I'm thinking of book recommendations, W.E. Butler, and it's called Apprenticed to Magic, and it's 2 copies in one, and Apprenticed to Magic and Magic and the Kabbalah. Again, an absolute excellent book for primer on magical practice when it comes to meditational stuff. And this was another one that was recommended to me in one of these lodges. And again, it blew my mind in the stuff it was suggesting. And those who are familiar with Aleister Crowley's work and his teachings, you'll find the same exercises taught also in the Golden Dawn, in various thelemic groups as well. These are fairly standard practices for magicians. So, picture a pendulum swinging, tick, tock, backwards and forwards. All you're going to do, you're just going to sit still, close your eyes, and imagine. You don't have to even visualize it so you can see it physically. You're just going to imagine a pendulum swinging. Now, how long can you keep it swinging for? And what you'll find is initially, it's really easy. It's amazing. It's like, yeah, I can keep that going. Yeah, keep it going. Then come back to it the next day. And classically, what people start to find is the more they do this, the harder it gets. The pendulum takes on a life of its own. You're trying to keep it going, but it doesn't go in the way you want it to. It might do 3 or 4 swings, and then it changes. And then the trick is to visualize that pendulum and bring it back under control once you've lost control of it. That's quite challenging, really difficult. Recommendation, do that for about 4 or 5 minutes at a time. Don't drive yourself crazy doing it, but do it regularly. In order to try and develop that principle. Once you can do that relatively well, then what you're going to do is have your pendulum and now have a cog, independent of the pendulum, rotating at a speed that is not related to the pendulum swing. And then once you can do that, so that's quite difficult to do, add a second cog of a different size to the first cog. So one cog drives the other. Pendulum swinging, 2 cogs turning. And then add a third cog later on, and then a fourth. And then you can start to build this great big machine. We're now getting into Nikola Tesla territory, because this was one of the abilities he would have. He could build machines and devices in his mind to such an intricate degree, and he could watch what would happen and how they all interplay with each other. He could move through the machines and watch what's happening on in the machinations of them. And that's quite a good skill to have, especially if you're an engineer and if you are working with machinery and stuff like that. But you can also do this with people and societies and bigger level constructs. And that's actually what you do. We have stories that are playing out in our imagination over time, even when we're not conscious of them. And there's other stories, like your friends from school, they don't play through in real time, which is why when you get together, you all revert immediately to being small children again and talk to each other all about school. because they don't update through real time. And this was one of the things that started to open up those concepts to me in terms of how I understand the world and my own interpretations and values and beliefs on what I thought was true and how much of that is just fabrication. So you can start building these machines. Once you can do that, of course, you can also then do another weird thing. Get an analog clock. So a clock that doesn't tick, it just rotates. I don't know if they even have those anymore, but I'm sure you can find one somewhere. And learn to watch the clock and close your eyes, and in your imagination you're seeing the second hand turning at the same speed it turns in real life. Now this may take you quite a few attempts to be able to visualize it and keep the visualization at the same speed. Now keep practicing that until you can now just imagine your eyes, close your eyes and imagine the clock and time yourself for precisely 1 minute. And this is quite a weird thing to have happen when you, because if you hold a minute in your imagination, and the game, we used to do this in Cub Scouts when I was a kid. It was how the Arcala used to get us all quiet after running around and being all excited. We'd have the game, which was she'd time us for a minute. We'd stand there with our eyes closed, and whoever sat down at the point they thought the minute was up would win whatever the prize was. And of course, people sitting down all at different rates. And mostly they sit down when they hear other people sitting down because they think that's going to be the time to sit down. But you can actually do this for real, and it is amazing that you'll find that you can do this incredibly well, and that in itself is quite a good meditation exercise. Just simply the second hand of a clock and keep it in real time. What else? Oh yeah, now the other magical practices to develop other senses. So we've got the visual and the auditory, and they're the easiest ones to do. But can you imagine the taste of chocolate to the point you actually taste it, your mouth waters and all the rest of it, and then do a lemon? What about lemon and chocolate? And so again, another exercise is to really build that experience until you're tricking your senses that you can actually taste it. And the other one is also with olfaction, with smell. They always say, imagine smelling a rose. And you keep going with the visualizations and the exercises until you can actually, again, trick yourself that you can actually smell it for real. Because now what we're doing is we're bringing all the senses and the abilities to interpret things in a sensory way under conscious control. And again, this is just a great way of regulating internal environment. Other little tips I think are worth knowing. I was staying one time in India in a lodging house, and the downstairs of the big building. The downstairs were people like myself, most of their own business and stuff like that. But the top two floors were residential, was where people lived. Every morning at around about 9 o'clock, all the residents that lived there would meet on the central landing and do chanting for 5 minutes. And that was their meditational practice. So they do the Hindu chanting for 5 minutes every single day, and then that's their day. What a great experience to have. So they've got a communal thing of meeting with everybody else. They've got a shared activity, and they're training their mind and brain through the mantra exercises they do, just as a habitual daily practice. Meditation teachers I come across tend to emphasize ridiculous duration of meditation. So the breathing exercises, the pranayama, people will go, well, you have to keep that going for a full hour. And I'm not entirely convinced that is worthy. Now, I used to do it for a full hour. I got to the point where that's how long I would do it for. But the breathing exercises, probably 2 or 3 minutes a day is a good start. We don't have to go full out. Just a few minutes a day is a fantastic introduction. You're now doing something that you didn't normally do. In my healthier days, which is hopefully I'll get back to, I would run. I would go running about 100 yards, literally. And people I knew, people I used to work with would laugh at me. So you go running, what, about 100? Yeah, I used to run 100 yards there and back again, down at the end of the road and back again every day. It would literally take me 2 minutes. And I felt really fit as a result. I have to say, I did feel really fit. And I would look at these people who were slightly overweight and heavy smokers and all the rest of it, who would laugh at me for doing that. And I think, interesting. Because people seem to have this notion that if you're going to go running, you're supposed to go running properly, and go for miles a day and do marathons and go jogging and become part of it. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I regularly do weights. Not enough that I'm a big sort of muscle, still skinny guy, but I do strength training, mostly when I'm able to, health-wise. Now, again, I don't go to the gym. I'm not muscle bound. So sometimes I tell people, yeah, I lift weights, and they'll laugh because, well, you don't look like you do. Yeah, but I do, and I do get fit as a result. The same thing with meditation. This notion that you either have to be a meditator, all in, so start putting beads in your hair and burning incense and all that kind of stuff and chanting and start becoming a bit wacky woo, or not at all. And that makes no sense to me. This is an introduction to me of processes by which we can regulate our internal environment in a much better way. So we don't have to go all out. And I was so pleased to see these Indians in this lodging house. 5 minutes a day, that was it. I did ask them, do you do everything? No, sometimes we do, but don't need to. 5 minutes is enough. Now, other things, something I've never done, and I have no intention of ever doing it. I don't know how this is pronounced correctly. Vipassana. It's the stereotypical 10-day meditation retreat. Now, Vipassana meditation, however that is pronounced, is a very interesting thing to practice. And I have practiced this a lot over the years. I've just never done the proper thing. This is why I now contradict what I was just saying before. It's the detached observation of your thought process. So it's not so much controlling where your thoughts are going and what your thoughts are doing. It is the separation in order to observe the thoughts happening. And it is amazing experience to do. It's also incredibly difficult. That's the thing I found. Now, a Vipassana retreat is typically 10 days where you're with a group of people, and all day, every day, you're just sitting, observing your thoughts. Now, I could probably tolerate that for about 5 minutes, maybe 10, before I start going crazy. And 10 days is a lot. A whole day is a lot. Half a day is a lot. But the research and the results that are achieved for people, this is absolutely life-changing for people. And it is an extraordinary experience to do that I've never done. I'm just going on other people's reports. There is a movie, it's a documentary on Netflix called The Dharma Brothers. Dharma is spelled D-H-A-R-M-A, Dharma Brothers. I believe it's also on YouTube as a paid thing. Dharma Brothers is remarkable. This was an experiment by a group of Vipassana meditational teachers who take this into prisons and essentially they train people to get ready for their 10-day meditational retreat. And the results are absolutely undeniable. It is amazing what you see happen to these individuals. Now, this happened in America, and of course, they put a stop to it because in the Christian states, the Bible Belt, they didn't like this because it wasn't Christian, and that was why they stopped it. The most amazing thing was happening, and it was on religious grounds because, Hell Found Damnation is a far better way to run prisons than actually do something constructive for people. But do watch Dharma Brothers, and it is a remarkable movie in itself, but it also shows the power of Vipassana. Now, the BBC did an experiment too. It's on iPlayer, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it's called now. And essentially, a bunch of people in a great big warehouse go into a container, one of these shipping containers, on their own. I think it's for 5 days. One person came out after an hour, couldn't tolerate it. And they have nothing to do. They're complete social isolation, complete deprivation from all contact for 5 days. And that's all that's happening. There's nothing else happening. It's amazing that what happens to those people who manage to endure the whole thing. The changes they made in their lives, because now they're free from external distractions. They're actually now exposed to themselves. And most of these people make completely life-changing decisions and about how they're going to live completely differently. And our modern times of mobile phones and endless distractions and social media, I think we are preventing people from actually confronting parts of themselves in order to be able to deal with stuff. And with endless distractions, when people fail to deal with things on developmentally, we then subject them to therapy. Yeah, got questions about that. So yes, Dharma Brothers and Vipassana is well worth looking at, and this I'll put it in the comment section if I can find I'll find it on the iPlayer. Right, what else have I got on my list? Right, light and sound machines and AlphaStim, we'll get to that. Right, chakras, chakra meditations. Now, I've never engaged in the chakra meditations as taught in Hinduism and Buddhism, simply because that is complicated. There's a lot of stuff to that, and that itself is a complete system. If you want to do the chakra stuff as taught and practiced by the mystics out east, go and train with the mystics out east. Go and join a Buddhist order, one of the Hindu groups. There's lots and lots of them around. Get some recommendations first, because there is a lot. It's not just a case of, oh yes, I'm opening up my heart chakra. Oh, for God's sake. There's so much of that woo-woo New Age stuff interpretation. It's so superficial. It's just not worthy. It's just not even worth paying attention to. Go to the source. To get an idea of some of the complexities, Wikipedia, actually, go onto the chakra pages of Wikipedia, and it will hopefully amaze you about just how much is involved. The chakras themselves being a part of the body, so we have sensory element, there's a visualization that goes with it, it has its set of symbols, it has a mantra that will go with it, it may even have incense, it may have a sacrament. Essentially all bodily senses are represented within these meditations. Much like in churches as well, although they don't like to think of these things as meditations, but actually all rituals. But of course the church is full of meditations and rituals. Just look at what people do with prayer beads and confessions and the Eucharist, all these rituals and ceremonies. And there's lots of incense. We have the stained glass windows and the light coming through. There's the song, there's the organ, there's the sound of the resonance of the building. All senses are overwhelmed with what's happening. Most of that, though, is extraneous. In Hindu and in the Buddhist chakra system, this is not so much extraneous, it is the creation of an internal environment. So it's well worth, if you really want to do it properly. Don't do the New Age stuff you learn down the community centre, or the wacky woo person with flowy dresses and beads, or the sex pest man with long hair. So I just wanted to mention the chakra thing. It's not something I have any experience of. My stuff around chakras is based around the Kabalistic system. I will do a live stream or a video, do on a Wednesday video, on the Kabalistic and magical chakra system that I've employed. That it deserves a thing unto itself, because it will take me probably about an hour to get through just the basic explanation of what's going on there. If there's enough interest, I'll do stuff on this one as well. I've put it out on the vote that's up at the moment for what I do next week, and it looks like Introduction to the Tarot and Kabbalah seems to be winning. So if there's enough interest, I'll do several on that, because it's a huge subject. Right, what else we got in my... right, got to introduce you to this. Now, I plugged this in there, it didn't work. These you get all over India. They're absolutely fun. I love them. I've got various ones, but none that I can plug in here. This one I can plug in here, but it doesn't work anymore. This literally costs £2. This is a prayer box. It's not even an audio recording. It's digitally encoded, and these things kind of screech and scream. It's the sound of India. These come loaded with all of the main religious mantras from the Vedas and from the various spiritual texts, of which there's hundreds and hundreds of them. If you don't have access to a group and you want to do the chanting and mantras, or just have this as background, get yourself one of these. Now, they're Indian made and they're very, very cheap. They're 2-pin plug, and it's a metal box, and they break really easy. And I do wonder if they'll burn your house down or electrocute you. So get one that's been quality tested before you plug it in. This one is called Deepam Divine Voice. Actually, it was really good. It rattles a bit now, and it doesn't work. And there's others that are you can pick them up for like £1. Have a look on eBay. They're called mantra boxes or prayer boxes, although both will bring up other things from churches and stuff like that. They're actually pretty good if you want a background environment. Incense as well. Get some good quality incense. What else was I going to do? Oh, where is it? Right, last couple of things. Devices. Now, this thing here, I used to retail these. This is called an AlphaStim, and I'll show you how it works. This, it's not really meditation as such, but I think it has great value for meditators. You clip it on your earlobes. I've already wetted the conduction pads. Now what this does, I'll turn it on. This is now currently sending a microcurrent. I can just about feel it on the ears. It sends a microcurrent of an alpha wave signal across the brain. This is an induction tool. If you're already in alpha, if you're pretty relaxed already, you won't notice anything apart from prickling of the ears. At the moment, I feel absolutely nothing happening. If I get a little bit stressed, if I've been a little bit ranty of a day, and I put this on, I immediately, it's almost instantaneous, feel woozy. And when people try these for the first time, they will say, oh, it feels a bit like being drunk. That should tell you quite a lot. Because for a lot of people, the only association they have with going into alpha is through alcohol. And they never really go into an alpha state. What people are amazed at when they feel really, really woozy, when I used to retail these, don't retail them anymore. Amazing devices, not so happy with the company. And so I severed my business relationship with the company for various reasons, which I'm contractually forbidden to talk about, which should tell you everything you need to know. However, I can't fault the device. This is called an AlphaStim. The new products they've brought out are so overpriced, so expensive, ridiculous. You want one like that, get one like that. It should cost you round about somewhere between £50 and maybe £200. I used to retail these new at £225. But if you get them second hand, you should get it for less than, obviously, for that. The new ones are like £800 to £2,000. It's insanely overpriced. But if you try one of these and you immediately feel like you feel fine, you put this on and suddenly you feel like you're drunk, that should tell you quite a lot about your brainwave stuff. And so you may want to consider investigating how to adjust your brainwaves. This induces it, so it passes an electrical current of an alpha wave, and that's what makes this unique. They've got the trademark, copyright, whatever the word, patent on that particular frequency. So any other product won't do this because they own the patent on it. It's worth it. It's a good little measure. So if you can borrow one of these of somebody, it's a good little test for yourself to see what you can do. Now the light and sound machines, I couldn't find mine. It's been sat in the drawer for years unused. I used to retail those as well, and I used to have them all because the different companies would send me samples of light and sound machines. Their pricing of them is very different. Now they're a pace and lead. So whereas the AlphaStim induces an alpha wave, the light and sound machines are a pace and lead into different frequencies. The price ranges are enormous, and I've got to tell you, having been a retailer and tested most of the ones that I was able to get my hands on, there was no benefit to the more expensive ones, none whatsoever. The two best of all of the ones I used to sell, the MindLab Proteus and the MindLab Sirius, but I don't think the Sirius is made anymore. You could sell the Sirius for, I think, $50. The most basic is the cheapest of the bunch. No one wanted to buy them because they were too cheap. The MindLab Proteus, which is absolutely fantastic, was twice the price and was more popular because people didn't want the cheapest one. What they do is they pulse sound and light, so it's like a strobe effect. Now they come preloaded, so if you program them yourself, which the Proteus you can do, you can potentially induce a seizure in yourself. So don't go messing with it if you don't know what you're doing. But the preloaded settings, they're pretty safe to use unless you're particularly susceptible. But what they have is this ability to synchronize to music. So you connect them up to your sound player. So not only is it pulsing the sound through the headphones, it also can play the music through the headphones. And it will synchronize the light frequencies to that particular music. All well and good so far. But they also produced, and these were mostly produced in Germany, audio CD series. Don't bother downloading the MP3s. They don't have the magic encoded in them because the compression, they lose the coding. The CDs have an inaudible frequency that drives the light and sound show. And my goodness, these things are remarkable. They're absolutely remarkable. The two favourite ones were Audio Illusions, which was just amazing, and the other one I've completely forgotten the name of. But if you get the CD set that comes with it, It is mind-blowing what they have produced with this. And it's the Mind Lab Proteus, and you want the audio CDs that come with it, which they sell separately. I don't sell them anymore, by the way. You'd have to look at elsewhere for them. Now, what these are able to do is, as a pace and lead, they can train you into the alternate states that you are trying to get to. So in themselves, they're not really a meditation because you are passive to what's happening. The same with the AlphaStim. But they can facilitate your ability to achieve those experiences. They can facilitate your ability to enter into those altered states. I don't recommend getting the expensive versions, simply because you'll use them for about 6 weeks. They end up in the drawer like all of mine do, and then untouched since. Because once they've done the job, you find you won't need them anymore. You learn quickly with these things. Mind Lab Proteus, or the Sirius, which is just as good, half the price, and the AlphaStim. Get this. These ones they don't make anymore. They only sell the really expensive ones. So again, look on eBay. Although I think they did a deal with eBay, so you can't buy them there anymore. So shop around auction sites and stuff like that. You may find them elsewhere on the internet. Right, go back to my list of stuff. Anything I've missed here? Breathing, last one, breathing exercise. Now, for me, this is again a lifelong practice. Well, since I was 18, and it's the Pranayama. Crowley's book, 8 Lectures on Yoga, will give you the Pranayama exercises, and this is simply rhythmical breathing. So you can breathe in and out, breathe in and out, breathe in, hold, out, hold, and for different time lengths as well. When you first start practicing that, you may want to just do, say, 10 rounds of that breathing. I was surprised because I started out with Pranayama long before I joined any of the magical groups. And I was learning to be able to do the Pranayama breathing stuff for about an hour uninterrupted, which I was able to do. When I was first introduced to an examination, people were basically required to do this for 10 breathing cycles. And that surprised me. I was expecting it was going to be a lot harder than it was. And it actually makes sense that people just do it for a short period of time. And this doesn't have to become a complete way of life where you give up an hour of your day. That's like effectively a day a week accumulatively that you're giving up. It doesn't have to be that way. We can keep this stuff very much in balance. So I tend to do this mostly in bed. So in the morning sometimes, but every night when I get into bed. And if I'm waiting somewhere, which I do a lot, I'm waiting for things to begin, I'm waiting at airports, I'm waiting for trains, I'm waiting in departure lounges. There's lots of times I'm spent waiting. So these are the opportunities that I utilize to do this for. Here is what Crowley suggested would be the ultimate proof that you've got somewhere. You can go through your day with your mantra and your meditation uninterrupted by your day-to-day activity. What we have is this notion that I sit still in a quiet place uninterrupted by other people and I do my meditation. What would happen if I was to do the supermarket weekly shop doing my meditation at the same time? Try that. So we start to introduce and integrate the mystical meditational practices into everyday life, rather than have a veil and a division between how I function in the world and how I function in my mind outside of the world. What we want to try and do is create an integration. So Crowley suggested your success can be measured when you can go through your day and through unbroken sleep with the mantra still going unbroken. And that shows you have it integrated in. This is my frustration with the New Age and a lot of the meditators that I've encountered over the years. They don't function in everyday life. Their functioning in everyday life basically revolves around me the whole time. Or they're very weak and vulnerable because of their vulnerable belief systems they've adopted and so forth. They're not better functioning in society. They actually seem to function less in society. And so I think that's quite an important thing. Integration is key. Right, my hour is up. If anyone has any thoughts on any of this stuff, any additional stuff, do please stick it in the comment section. The voting is up for, if you made it this far, of course, I mean, if you're still watching after an hour, I'm amazed. The voting is up for next week's live stream, so do please stick a vote on there. And thank you for watching my little video here. I wish you all a great day and an even better weekend.